Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a fast game. For those who have been out of the game for a while, this might be how you think it looks like. But now, Yu-Gi-Oh! Be like this. Now what you saw might look scary, and you might feel like there should be some big old gotcha button to punish people who do these long-winded combos. Maybe you don't, maybe you do, who knows. Well, whether you do or don't, Konami sure as hell did. And it took one card, Konami's R&D team, they made one singular card, and now we have one of the most broken, insane, and controversial cards in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. I'm Jake Pig Yu-Gi-Oh! And this is the story of Mystic Mine. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has many different ways to play the game. Of all, there's about 4 major ways, with 2 being in each category. 2 combo and 2 control variants. There are decks that are grindy, built around out-resourcing your opponent and just slowly building up advantage until you can just take out the other board entirely. A few examples of this are Salamangreat, Orchist. There are also backrow decks, meaning that they utilize powerful spell and trap cards that, if used properly, can cut off your opponent's turn entirely and just slowly whittle down your opponent. Examples of this type of control are Guru and Altergeist. On the other end of the spectrum, there's combo. For combo decks, there's decks that like to go first in order to set up a ton of negates to prevent your opponent from playing the game and just being able to swing for game on the next turn. Examples of this are Pendulum killed the game, and Spiral. There are also combo decks built around going second in order to OTK or one turn kill your opponent, meaning building up enough of a field just be able to wipe your opponent's life point out in that one turn. Examples of this include Cyber Dragons and Trains. Between control and combo, both of them are loved or loathed for a variety of different reasons, or maybe you're just neutral on them. However, combo, namely decks that go first, are often the most busted decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! When people say Yu-Gi-Oh! Is all about setting up a bunch of negates so you can never play, this is usually what they're referring to. A common phrase used is break my board, due to how hard it is just to having to play through multiple gates that combo decks can set up. While backward decks can set up multiple gates much easier by just simply setting a card down, they're at an inherent disadvantage due to how many cards that can deal with them, such as Twin Twister, Evenly Matched, or Lightning Storm. However, combo uses monsters, which are significantly harder to get rid of, not only due to the gates, but there are many powerful cards that cannot be destroyed and in some cases even targeted by card effects. As such, cards as the aforementioned Lightning Storm, or even older cards like Dark Hole and Regeki, aren't going to do a whole lot to these established boards, and even cards vulnerable to it can be saved by a negate that they more often times have set up. Now, Konami has printed cards to get around this issue. Cards such as Ring Dragon of Ra Sphere Mode, Nibiru, and the Kaiju lineup all exist so they contribute and get over the monsters in order to get rid of them, with the exception of the Nibiru, which can be negated. Even cards like Dark Ruler No More exist that can prevent your opponent's monsters effects from being used, and monster effects can't respond to it, however they can still use spell and trap cards in order to respond to that negate. However, the issue with this is there's no reliable way to guarantee you open with any of these cards, and these cards are pretty much useless unless you open with them, otherwise you're just not going to be able to defeat your opponent, not going to be able to do anything that turn, and then your opponent just kills you the next turn. But more often than not, these are all cards usually played in the side deck due to them being just complete dead in control decks. Combo decks, if not checked, can be very unhealthy for the game, especially if they're super consistent. There has to be a balance, and powerhouse cards like Nibiru and Dark Ruler No More are almost necessary checks to combo to prevent them from just dominating the meta, and these cards allow decks to have a fair chance against them. After all, a control deck going second against a combo deck basically has no way of winning unless they brick, and some of the best combo decks in the game can even then still play through the negates they set up. Now what does all this have to do with Mystic Mine? Well, combo decks generally don't run many back row removal cards, if any at all, since they usually don't need to worry too much about them. Konami knew this and wanted a way to check combo decks and ensure that there was a card so powerful, combo decks would have to run some kind of back row removal, or risk the wrath of the titular card they would unleash onto the metagame. Mystic Mine. If you already play Yu-Gi-Oh!, you probably already know what this card does, and you've probably seen it many a time. But for those of you who don't, allow me to explain it. The effect reads as follows. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, your opponent cannot activate monster effects or declare an attack, and also vice versa. Konami also thought a way to balance Mystic Mine was to add the following. Once per turn, during the end phase, if both players control the same number of monsters, destroy this card. At first glance, this might seem fine. After all, there's a built-in way that destroys the card itself, and you can have it backfire on you if somehow you end up with more monsters than your opponent controls. Of course, it can always be taken care of by something like a Cosmic Cyclone or a Mystical Space Typhoon. On paper, this is fine. Mystic Mine is a way for rogue decks to stand up to the large combo decks and punish them for overcommitting and not playing some sort of out of the card. While this may seem fine and fair, this is only on paper. In practice, the literal floodgates open. So, decks started to sprout up based all around Mystic Mine. The card was so powerful that this was a pretty easy task, and utilized two of Yu-Gi-Oh's most hated playstyles, Stall and Burn, meaning you stall at your opponent from playing the game while slowly using card effects to bring their life points down to 0. Now there's little ways to counteract life point effect damage, so you usually just kind of have to sit there and take it unless you can get rid of the cards that are causing it. Basically, the deck revolved around turboing out Mystic Mine with stuff like Terraforming, Metaverse, and Demise of the Land. It would then slowly burn your opponent with cards like Wave Motion Cannon and Cauldron of the Old Man. Mystic Mine Burn would also make sure the field spell would stay protected with cards like Field Barrier, preventing it from being destroyed, including by its own effect, and Goddess Skulk's Oracle to prevent your opponent from being able to draw the out, because you could control what they would draw. Some Mystic Mine decks even ran Prohibition, calling something like Cosmic Cyclone, Twin Twister, Evenly Matched, whatever, so the opponent couldn't get around Field Barrier's protection. Because what Prohibition does is just prevent that card, whatever you declare, that card's effect cannot be used. The only monster cards the deck would really ever run were DD Guide to force a monster onto your opponent to make Mystic Mine live, and Lilith, Lady of Lamet, to search out traps, as well as enabling the deck to play Dark Sacrifice for an extra layer of protection for Mystic Mine. And Mystic Mine Burn saw a fair bit of competitive success, including a top 16 placement at Pro Play Tour Orlando, courtesy of one of the most popular Mystic Mine players, Jeff Leonard, as well as even a first place finish at the September 2019 San Jose Regionals from Son Nguyen, and even a top 64 placement at the North American World Championship Qualifier in 2019, being piloted by Jason Kartanowicz. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. The deck didn't get consistent tops, as the Mystic Mine got removed from the field in some way, the strategy would fall apart quite easily. However, the deck quickly became rather hated because it promoted inactivity and turned it into an incredibly slow game that boiled down to constantly passing turn, hoping to eventually be able to draw you out to Mystic Mine, and if you didn't act quick enough, you'd just be burned without getting a chance to really play the game. However, due to the glass cannon nature of Mystic Burn, it didn't fully catch on to the metagame. While Mystic Mine Burn wasn't anything special, Mystic Mine as a card was just getting started, and it will leave the comfort of being used in only control decks. Now you might be thinking, it's fine. People need to be running cards that can handle backwards focused decks, and shouldn't be able to play cards with just reckless abandon, which, fair. However, that's not necessarily the issue with Mystic Mine, but we'll touch on that more a bit later. For now, let's focus on Mystic Mine's place in the meta. While Mystic Mine has its own deck never reached past Rogue status, the meta saw the potential of Mystic Mine and just kind of ran away with it. When Mystic Mine gets activated and your opponent has no ready responses for it, it just turns into a giant pause button on the duel. That way you'd just be able to stall out until you do your primary engine pieces and then break your own Mystic Mine and then start comboing off. With Mystic Mine on the field, all the opponent could do was just summon monsters like Lings, XZs, but they couldn't really do much beyond that. A lot of the time, combo decks need a specific card or two to really pop off and get their engine going, so being able to simply put a hold on the game until you're able to draw those cards is just incredibly valued. And as such, Mystic Mine wasn't just for control decks anymore. Combo decks came and called it one of their own, and this was a great success. The card is playable in decks such as Orcus, Sky Striker, Spiral, Salamangreat, Cyber Dragon, Sador, Altergeist, Hero, Trains, Ancient Gear, Watts, Guardians, Oko, Thief of Crones, Ramana Blue, Beatdown, Solitaire, Go Fist, and of course, Empty Jar. Now then, now that you know the story of Mystic Mine and its place in the metagame, why is this card so controversial? Is the card ban-worthy? Is it healthy for the game? You'll get a different answer really depending on who you ask, and my answer personally is, yeah, I think Mystic Mine's a terrible card, and one of the most unhealthy cards in the entire current metagame. I'll explain why I believe that, but first allow me to explain the perspective of those who think Mystic Mine is fine. I touched a bit upon this earlier, and Mystic Mine is a way to punish combo decks that don't run any ways to get rid of spell and trap cards. Certain cards must exist in order to punish certain deck building choices. If they focus fully on combo without having to worry about anything, Yu-Gi-Oh! Just becomes a real game of break my board, while the first in player always wins the game. So cards need to exist that prevent that from happening. Not just Mystic Mine, but also other cards I previously mentioned do this, such as Dark Ruler No More and even the Hand Trap lineup. Without these checks, combo just runs wild and nothing can really punish them, and the game just becomes a one-player game. However, there are cards that can use in a much more healthy way than Mystic Mine. One of the issues Mystic Mine has is how hard it is to get rid of. The situation where both players have the same number of monsters does not come up often, so its way to kind of balance itself out and built into the card never really works. Now let's look at another card like it from way back in the day, and a card probably everyone who's even heard of Yu-Gi-Oh! Knows about, Swords of Revealing Light. Swords of Revealing Light has some similarities, acting as a floodgate that prevents attacking. While it's not nearly close to even like touching the power that Mystic Mine has effect-wise. Back in the day, it was so good that it had to be put on the limited list. Swords was balanced in the way it was destroyed, that being after 3 turns it would destroy itself. Rather than being a giant pause button like the way Mystic Mine is, it was always going to be there for 3 turns, and then you won't have to worry about it. The same cannot be said for Mystic Mine, which under more circumstances won't be destroyed by its own effect, except by the person who used it when they're ready to swing for game. Again, the reason for Mystic Mine's existence isn't the reason why the card is bad for the game. It's important to keep combo decks in check. However, when the combo decks can abuse that check, that's when the card becomes even more of an issue. And there's a lot more to it than that, so let's get into the real meat of the video and talk about why Mystic Mine's an issue. I've already talked a lot about how Mystic Mine just creates a giant pause in the game state, and how there's ways to control the way your opponent top decks to prevent them from drawing their out. Even without that, more likely than not, you're not going to be running more than a small handful of cards that can deal with back row in general. Otherwise, the deck you're playing will likely lose a lot of its functionality. There can even be times where the out to Mystic Mine just happens to naturally be at the bottom of your deck, and by the time you get to it, the game is pretty much already over. Unless you have a spell or trap card that can get rid of that card, you're basically guaranteed to lose the duel. Not every deck is going to be playing spell or trap cards that can destroy back row, in the main decks anyways, we'll get to that. Cards like Lightning Storm and Evenly Matched can both deal with them, but are generally more side deck cards in most cases. But one of the most played Link monsters in the entire game is Nightmare Phoenix. Nightmare Phoenix is a card that just about every single deck can make, with an effect where at the cost of discarding one card, can target and destroy any spell or trap card. If you look at just about any deck profile ever since it came out, basically every single deck is running at least one copy of this card. And none of the decks that run this card necessarily need to, but they play it in case there's a problem floodgate they need to get rid of, such as there can be only one or summon limit. So it's not to say the decks aren't running back row removal, they're just running it in the form of a monster rather than a spell and trap card. And that's part of the reason why Mystic Mine warps the meta so hard. Even if you go into a Nightmare Phoenix, its effect to destroy a back row cannot be activated. Now the reason Nightmare Phoenix is played in pretty much every deck is to have a back row removal to make sure you have it so you can get rid of these kind of cards. So you can focus your main deck on the archetype you're playing as well as any other tech option. And that's another issue with Mystic Mine. The fact that it exists in the game currently causes every single deck to have to build around, can I out Mystic Mine? And a singular card should not be that polarizing and centralizing. And that's why Mystic Mine is problematic. It creates a whole rift in deck building that make every single choice in the deck building process that you have some way to deal with the card, or it's just straight up losing to it. If you don't run it out in your deck game 1 and Mystic Mine gets activated against you, you basically just lose the game straight up. A singular card shouldn't be able to have that much weight to it and control the game that much. You shouldn't just have an instant win button essentially. It's just not something that's healthy for the game. It creates uninteractive game states, punishes way too hard to the point where it just wins games on its own, and controls the metagame just way too overbearingly. Now I've talked about how Mystic Mine creates a giant pause in the game state of a duel quite a few times, and there are cards already on the ban list that do just that. A card that shares some similarities to this I find is Maxi. Maxi did a lot of things that Mystic Mine did against combo decks. You see Maxi as the effect, where you can send the card to the graveyard, and each time your opponent special summons a monster, you get to draw a card. So why was this card banned? In the TCG anyways. Well, in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's no resources you need to use cards like mana and magic or energy in Pokemon. Once you have the card, so long as the conditions are met, you can use it right away. As such, card advantage is a very big deal in Yu-Gi-Oh! That's why cards like Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity are banned and will likely never be unbanned. With Max C, when it got played, it created a kind of stalemate situation. You can either continue your combo at the cost of your opponent drawing a bunch of the deck and getting resources, or stop your combo full stop and hope your opponent can't combo off on you and pass your turn to them. Maxi just created this Catch-22 situation where whoever had it played against him essentially just lost no matter what they did. And this is where the similarities with Mystic Mine comes in. It just causes a game state to become so drastically warped and punish you for simply playing the game. Now cards like Card by the Grave didn't exist when Maxi was at 3, so there was less checks to hand traps. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that because Maxi existed, the entire metagame had to play with the knowledge that one card could just cancel their turn, and in some cases even cause them to lose the game. Maxi was just an unhealthy card to stay in the game because of how much of a blowout it could be, and that's the same issue with Mystic Mine, but to honestly a greater extent. With Maxi, you could still combo off, but with Mystic Mine, it creates a bigger issue where you just can't do anything in response to it unless you happen to have the out or a way to negate the activation. You also had to hope that it didn't have a second copy of Mystic Mine that you couldn't negate or destroy, otherwise you're back to square one. Mystic Mine is a more control-oriented card, but that doesn't mean combo-oriented cards aren't the problem either. That's why cards like Level Eater and Firewall Dragon are on the ban list. They can just continuously recycle and loop their effects to create these insane boards that are just nearly impossible to break. Mystic Mine isn't an issue because it's a controlled card that's good, it's a card that's just over-centralizing the metagame. When Firewall Dragon was legal, it was one of the most played cards in the game just for how easily abusable it was. When a card is just that dominating and that controlling of a meta while being incredibly overpowered, that's when cards need to be hit on the ban list, and that's exactly where Mystic Mine lies. A lot of cards on the ban list exist because of combo, so it's not to say that it's because Mystic Mine's a control card that makes the game unfun, it's just that it's way too polarizing. A card being played often doesn't make a card a problem card. So many decks run cards like Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, Nightmare Phoenix, and Called by the Grave, and some might even see more play than Mystic Mine. So why aren't these cards a problem? Simply put, just because a card is good does not make it overpowered. All these cards are good, but let's take a closer look at Ash Blossom in particular. You can discard it to negate any effect that essentially moves a card from the deck to anywhere else. Now there's some people who think this card should be banned, which it shouldn't, but that's a discussion for another day. But Ash Blossom is balanced in the fact that once it's used, it's used. It's not like the effect lingers. Ash Blossom is one of the best hand traps in the entire game, and there's some cases where if used right, it can force your opponent to just pass the turn. However, with something like Mystic Mine, it almost guarantees that unless you have an immediate response, that the game is going to go into a deadlock game state for until you can draw the out, assuming you haven't gone through it already or you have it in your deck to begin with. With Ash Blossom, even though there's some cases it can be a blowout, getting Ash once isn't going to guarantee your turn ends. It's a hard once per turn effect after all, so you don't have to worry about it happening twice, assuming you have other cards you can use. You can play through a single Ash Blossom, while that isn't the case for Mystic Mine, most of the time anyways. And so, that's about everything you need to know about Mystic Mine, and the reason I potentially think it needs to go. At the time of this video's release, Mystic Mine is currently limited in the OCG, meaning you can only play one copy of it, and fully unlimited in the TCG, which means you can play 3 copies of it like any other non-restricted card. Many people have been clamoring for the card to be banned, with a handful saying it should stay in the game and is fine. Whether you think it needs to stay or go, it's impossible to deny the significant impact Mystic Mine has had on the metagame. Time will tell what the future holds for Mystic Mine. It might stick around, or join the other floodgates in Floodgate Hell. I've been JPEG Yu-Gi-Oh! Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more Yu-Gi-Oh! Content.